Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about how to fight a larger and stronger opponent in the streets. More specifically, we're going to talk about my book, The Bigger They Are, the Harder They Fall. Now, besides talking about the contents of this book, I'm going to give you specific strategies and techniques that you can readily apply. Let's check it out. So here's the front cover of the book. This is the spine, and this is the back of the book. It's approximately 200 pages. It's available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook edition. I will put a link in the description down below if you want to check it out. Now, the motivation and the reason behind writing this book was because, in the 30 years plus that I've been teaching, I would always get the same question from my students: how do you fight someone who is bigger and stronger than you are? So I really felt that there was a need to write a book on this particular type of subject. So if we open up the book, we have our table of contents. We have a preface, 5 chapters, glossary of terms, and about yours truly. Chapter 1, important questions. I should mention from the beginning that this book is written in a question-answer format. Now, I just did this because I wanted to give my readers a different type of reading experience, and from what I gather from the feedback, it has been well received. So these are going to be just basic common questions about dealing with somebody who is larger and stronger than you are, just addressing a lot of issues regarding confidence issues and intimidation issues. I talk a lot about, will using MMA techniques work against a larger and stronger opponent? Or what happens if the opponent is taking anabolic steroids and he has freakish strength? So these are things that I have addressed in this initial chapter. Again, talk about intimidation, how to avoid being intimidated. I talk about how self-confidence can go a long way. So I really break it down into different components of how you can address this from a psychological perspective as well as a physical perspective. And then I talk about the advantages that larger and stronger adversaries will have over you, because it's important to know where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are. And then I talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of a smaller person or a weaker person. Now, the individual who's featured in this book, his name is Keith. He's a student of mine. This guy is massive. He was approximately 7 feet tall, well over 300 pounds, and strong as a bull. It was a real pleasure to work with him. He was also a student of mine, so you'll see him throughout this entire book. Super, super nice guy. He actually was a professional bouncer. This guy has seen more combat than pretty much anybody I've worked with. Really, really experienced guy. Again, we talk about different somatotypes. So we talk about here that there's basically 3 types of body types. We have an ectomorph, a mesomorph, and an endomorph. And I get into some pretty depth discussions about the advantages and disadvantages of these body types, which we call somatotypes. Chapter 2, the game plan. So this is all about preparing yourself for the inevitable fight. And I talk about the importance of striking power. And I talk about how a smaller person, and I refer to Bruce Lee quite a bit, talking about someone who is very small, approximately 130 pounds, can generate tremendous bone-crushing power. So I talk about how that can be developed. And then I get into the different techniques that you can utilize against someone who is look at the size difference between me and Keith. Just unbelievable difference. But I talk about the different offensive techniques that you can deliver against someone who is so much larger and stronger than you are. Again, we get into the offensive considerations, the stance structure. I talk about the importance of striking first, the legal ramifications of striking first, the advantages again, the importance of a compound attack. I talk about the adrenaline dump and what you can expect from a physiological and psychological perspective when that happens. I talk about the importance of the killer instinct. I talk about it in depth of what is a killer instinct. Target orientation, And then I also talk about, people don't really think about this, but someone who has an excessive amount of body fat has a lot of, it's kind of a buffer. It really protects them from striking vital targets. So we have to take that into consideration as well. Again, the anatomical targets when fighting someone who is larger and stronger. Fighting ranges. Work and mobility. And then we get into, in chapter 2, we get into defensive considerations. And of course, we have drills that would develop your defensive skills as well. And then at the end of the chapter, I have a game plan of putting it all together when dealing with someone who is, again, much larger and stronger than you are. Chapter 3, Preparing for the Beast. So this chapter is all about training because you want to train a little bit differently when dealing with someone who is larger and stronger. So I give a really good breakdown on the different types of training methodologies that should be added to your regular program. Talk about mental training as well. It's not just physical. Remember, combat is not just physical. Mental is just as important. Cardiovascular training, weight training, which is very important. Even though he's much larger and stronger than you are, you still need to weight train. Supplementation, the different tools you can use, and training equipment. A lot of information here for you. Different training methodologies that can be incorporated to your program. Talk about sparring, because there's a lot of people that will ask, is sparring an important component when preparing against a larger and stronger opponent? Well, the important thing is it does help with attribute development, but remember, sparring is not the real thing, folks, when we're talking about reality-based self-defense. And then I get a sample routine for training here. So chapter 4 is Armageddon. And so what this is we're taking all the previous chapters and we're putting them together for you to see how these principles are applied. So in this chapter, we have fighting scenarios where I'm fighting a much larger and stronger adversary. And we're demonstrating here the different combinations that work effectively against someone of this size, utilizing the proper tools and techniques that were discussed in the previous chapters. So lots of different fighting scenarios here. And sometimes I look at these pictures and he was a monster, this guy. Good guy, by the way. Super, just a really friendly individual. And it goes to show you can't judge a book by its cover. Except for this book, you can judge this by its cover. So lots of fighting scenarios. So chapter 5 is grappling and ground fighting, which is pretty essential when dealing with someone who is much larger and stronger than you are. So this is really addressed from a self-defense, reality-based perspective, not MMA, because we know in mixed martial arts there are weight divisions, which helps level the playing ground. But in the streets, it's a completely different ball game. So lots of questions and questions and answers dealing with that. And you could just see how just being on top of somebody just completely smothers him when someone's that big. So we talk about these issues because these are important considerations. We talk about how to avoid the ground fight, how to avoid the upper body tackle, which is very common for larger adversaries, unskilled adversaries who would just want to tackle you, take you down to the ground, and just pummel you. So we address that. We talk about nuclear fighting tactics on the ground, which is very important. And then we get into defending against basic hand grabs. Again, this is, if you can arrest the assault at this situation, at this level, before it goes to the ground, you're doing yourself a world of service. So again, you want to arrest the problem at its root, and many times it starts with grabs, shirt grabs. And my rapid response video series on YouTube covers a lot of these different escapes and defenses against grabs and chokes. And finally, at the end, we have a glossary of terms because it's very important to always have glossary of terms so you understand the nomenclature and terminology within the book. We're gonna just thumb through this real quick. And then we have a little bit about me. And again, I think there's some ads for the other books in the back. So this is the book, The Bigger They Are, the Harder They Fall, How to Fight a Bigger and Stronger Opponent in the Street. If you do own this book, I would love to hear your experiences in the comments section below. And once again, thanks for your time, and I'll see you guys at the next video.